up. Good afternoon and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session for January 26th, 2021. And Happy New Year to everyone. At this time, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. John Hill to work us through our agenda today. Mr. Hill?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, board, staff, and our community members. It's good to see everyone today. It's an honor and privilege to sit in on behalf of Ms. Bird today. Our first discussion item today, item 1, is an update on our Griffin Elementary Top 2 option plan, and we have Ms. Pat Barnes coming to share that with us at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So what we have today is the procedural piece for Griffin Elementary. As you know, they're in their second year, really third if it weren't for COVID, with external operator. According to the Florida Department of Education, we are required to present plans of progress and plans of what we would do in the event that, God forbid, they don't make the grade. And so in November, the superintendent had to submit her choice, and the last two choices that we are in at this time are closure or charter status. And at that time, the closure plan was presented to you. Now, by January 31st, we have to be a little bit more implicit with that plan, and that's what was attached and sent to you previously. We feel very strongly that Griffin's going to make the grade. They could have almost made a B, all things being in place last year, had it not been for COVID. So we're extremely disappointed that we weren't able to test, but we understand. And so they're working really hard. We're still seeing great progress there. But this is just a procedural matter that we have to present the top 2 plan, which is what I submitted. Questions?
Any questions? We'll go Ms. Miller.
Can you tell me how, so I can understand the process a little bit better? With our graduating class, when we suspended testing at that time, it showed an advancement of our graduation rate and other data showing that we were doing what the kids are always doing without that test. So how did that affect this school as far as, was there another test, was there a test they weren't able to give, or were they given all the tests in that year they would have taken without COVID?
So at the elementary level, there are no other tests other than the Florida State assessment. And so we weren't able to give that test. And that is the only thing that they're going to use to determine that a school has been able to maintain or increase a grade is that state test. That's it. So because there wasn't a test, all schools were held harmless, if you will, and in that same holding pattern for another year. Many people may think that if your school grade was a 40%, which means you needed a 41 to get a C, I just missed it by 1 point. Well, that was during the 18-19 administration. Even though you're still in that same holding pattern now, the kids have changed, the data has changed. So you really
Commented on, these masks make it difficult.
I know.
Have they commented on, I know that we haven't gotten a final decision with what will happen this year. Have they commented on what would happen if they give the test? What would they do with that score? Have they made any?
So officially, they have not.
Okay.
We know that many superintendents, the goal would be, we understand there's a need for testing. We need that baseline data, but we don't want to have the schools penalized by grading them because of COVID and 2 years since the last test. So they have not come out and officially said if that is still the way they're going to proceed. We also know that through Wendy Dodge, that there has been a bill filed, and hopefully if that bill goes through, we would be held harmless, and then we would not be grading schools. But they have not officially said. I'm not a politician, but I would just say that I think that those decisions will come out very closely before they administer the test.
And the people I've talked to and that are politicians do believe something will be done. And so it looks like we will have that reprieve, especially for these schools.
Right.
So in that third year, we're talking about 18, 19, 2 years later. It will be a huge gap of the students who's still there to take the test.
And the standards change
Yes,
as well.
yes. Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Reynolds?
My questions are similar. So, yeah, kind of to her point, if they do waive this year, which it sounds like, I mean, either they'll have to do a statute change for learning gains to be able to be 2 years back, or they'll have to hold us harmless this year. The kids that were there originally when we went in to turn around are in middle school now, all of
Right.
them, right? There's, none of them will be
No,
there.
we still have this fifth grade class.
Okay, so it's, that just, I mean, is there any conversation about giving them an extra buffer year of, okay, we're gonna have to get a baseline at some point, or is that all still, is there anything we can do, I guess, talking to legislators to make sure that, I know they're aware of the situation, but to make sure they understand some of what the repercussions could be because of how COVID's impacted it?
So we, at my level, and we meet with the state daily through walkthroughs, through various classes, and also the state meets with us once a month. We have pushed that, and they know exactly how we feel about it. I think in that reference to your question, what else could be done, I think it's just continuously letting the legislature know that things are so much different right now. And is it fair to grade schools in this manner? And what else are we going to be able to do to offer, as you said, a buffer for students? And additionally, new standards are coming out, and that's going to change things yet again. And I think all we can do is continue to put that pressure on our legislators and know how we feel. But they aren't exposing themselves to us in any manner to show their hand ahead of time. They just aren't.
So do we feel like if we did have a baseline this year, that it would be helpful to get the learning gains for the following year, or that with standards changing, we don't even know what's
So
going
they're
to be
really
on the test the following year?
Right, they're really two different things, because right now this year, the learning gains are going to come off fifth grade.
Right.
And so the last time they were tested was in third grade. So that's a big jump. It's a totally different test. So we're trying our best to get that. If they decide that we are not going to use the test for grades, all we can do is kind of look at it as a measurement of how a 2-year differential assisted or hurt our students. How much growth did we make, and then what do we need to do going further? And then we have to take into consideration that we also have e-learning going on, and that's a totally different situation in itself, while we're trying to provide that same quality instruction that they're getting in face-to-face. It's different. And so all of those factors come into play, and I just really think that the legislature or the Florida Department of Education really has to look at, this is such a different situation. I don't see how you could penalize us, which is the way I feel it would be, in grading schools this year.
Okay. And my last question, and then I'll give other people a chance, but do you know offhand what percentage of Griffin is e-learning? If you don't, it's okay, because I know it's from left field.
At this particular time, we're about at 15%.
15? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
I apologize for having to step out of the meeting, but one of the things I wanted to make sure that the public understands is this is just a process that we have to do.
Right.
And we don't want to alarm the community that Griffin is going to be closing.
Right.
I have had an opportunity to participate in the CAT meetings, and the last meeting that we had, there was representation from the state. And I did ask her if they were going to not utilize grades because of the impact that our kids have had with e-learning and everything. And she basically said it was not in her hands,
Right.
it's in the governor's hand. And she wasn't sure exactly what he was leaning towards, but she didn't know if it was leaning towards excusing the grades. So I know that Griffin has been working extremely hard. My understanding is that they were just about there
Yes.
last school year. And I know that they're working extremely hard this year with great support from educational direction. So I think we just need to stay focused, stay steady, and believe that the students and the staff and the families will turn that situation around at Griffin. I have confidence in them. I know that they will.
Thank you so much. They are doing exactly as you said.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, thanks for just noting that in regards, this is procedural. That's critical. I was just reading, and this is reiterating what Ms. Kay just said, but their motto for this past year, right? One team, one dream, no excuses.
Yes.
So moving, right? So, my hopes are that the continued work that they're doing is going to have a great outcome. I guess my question too, in regards to that, I think we want to be aware of these things too. When COVID took place, looking at last year, what's your take on how that transition took place in regards to engagement levels? Because you said fifth grade is going to be the critical.
So when COVID took place, had there not been COVID, and we had our normal testing process, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade would have been tested. We'd had prior year data, and we could see the advancement in all grades. COVID happened, there was no test, which means the fifth grade are now sixth graders. The fourth grade is now the fifth grade, but they didn't test last year as fourth graders. And then you got third graders that are fourth graders really taking the fourth grade test. It's a different test from third grade, much more rigorous, if you will. So you've got a new testing group, but they've had a year off. And so that's difficult for anyone because you're moving up to the next level of testing. So are they doing their best to get them ready? They are. But having that year reprieve and being honest, from March until August, that's a big hit for students. Because while we were doing our best with the instructional plan, it's not the same as having students in class where you could help redirect and get them focused. And some students took advantage of that time, and maybe some didn't for various reasons. We know there were computer issues. And then we start off this year with the same situation where you've got some students in class and you have some students that are home. And so trying to wrangle all of that together. And then parents are scared, COVID is real. And so we are seeing the progress. It's different from last year, but we are seeing the progress. We're seeing gains, especially in ELA. We've just got to stay the course. And we will. They're working really hard. And the kids are engaged. And more parents are sending their children to the building now compared to having them at home. And that's why the percentages have gone down.
And that's critical for those students, I think for the teachers as well. I just came out of my first face-to-face class at Florida Southern today, and that energy is there and it's real. So if we can keep that moving forward, that's going to be awesome. Mrs. Barnes, thanks for your work on this. Our commitment, I know my commitment is that I will connect with legislators to promote this, and we want to protect Griffin. I mean, this school has a history going back to the 30s in our district. So there's a lot of success stories there.
Right,
And we want to keep that going.
it was a strawberry school.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Fields?
I believe this is on our legislative platform. I mean, I don't have the legislative platform in front of me, but I'm almost sure this is one of the issues that we are advocating on behalf of the school district. And it impacts more than just Griffin Elementary. It impacts a lot of our students. And one thing as it relates to e-learning, a lot of the parents last year they had to work. And some of those kids were left at home by themselves because they didn't have any other option. And then even some didn't even feel comfortable trying to teach them. So there's a whole lot of issues at hand, and we just have to keep working, again, staying focused and doing the best that we can to support our students, our families, our employees.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, Ms. Fields, to answer your question, it is number one on our statewide priorities.
Thank you.
So, yes, ma'am, we need to continue to make those contacts and let them know how important it is to us for them to be sensible during this very difficult time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this time? All right, Ms. Barnes, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We
Thank
appreciate
you
your
all.
leadership and your support
Thank you.
of not only Griffin Elementary, but of all our schools. Thank you so much. And Board, thank you for your willingness to, encourage and promote to our legislators to hold us harmless, give us an opportunity to use some baseline data to gain some momentum, and also with the fact that we do have new standards on the horizon next year. So thank you. All right, at this time, we are going to go to our second item. Item number 2 is our No Kid Hungry After School Meals Program grant, and we have Ms. Jenna Kazmarski to bring that information to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to bring a new opportunity before you today. We have been offered a grant award from No Kid Hungry. The grant funds would be available to us to hire a coordinator to oversee the implementation and then oversight for the after-school meals program. And it would fund the initial first year of that staff position until we could get the program up and running. The program would be new for the district. It is specifically for after-school programming, so it provides funding for meals that we can provide to students that are participating in after-school enrichment activities. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions.
Okay, Ms. Miller?
Would the funding go to the schools will we have a different distributor for this, or will it be just an extension of the food manager's budget to order for the after-school?
So the funding from the grant would be used to fund a new position
Right.
administratively. The funding then for the program itself comes through Department of Health through the school nutrition program, and it's just to be used for operational expenses. So yes, it would supply the food for the program. If there were equipment needs that we had, you do a separate budget for this program, similar to our summer meals program, to cover your expenses for the meals.
So would the new person in the new position oversee that for the district, or would they oversee the managers who are purchasing?
They
for
would
their schools?
oversee it for the district, so
Okay.
they would work on oversight of monitoring out in the schools, assisting the managers at the school level. And mostly, I want that person to really work on outreach to expand the opportunities this program provides. You can offer meals at the school site. You can also offer meals to community partners that are doing after-school enrichment as well.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Fields? And then Ms. Reynolds.
I
Ms.
noticed
Fields?
in the grant, you said that you didn't have the schools identified that would benefit from this. Do you have the schools identified yet?
No, ma'am, not until we know for sure that the program's up and running. That is something that the new staff member would be working on initially. We would initially target those that are currently offering the basic after-school snack, and we will look at the opportunity to maybe convert those over first, and then look for other opportunities throughout the district where there might be after-school activities happening, but we're not providing any kind of food to them currently.
And I think in the grant, you said 25 schools or something like that, if my memory serves me correctly.
That's just our initial target, so we should have no problem with capacity for anybody that might want to participate. But that's our initial target. That's about the number that are currently offering an after-school snack. But we think with more rigorous outreach, we could go far beyond that. The program will fully support itself, so there should not be any issues with us going beyond that.
Well, I commend you all for addressing this issue. It's a very serious issue in our county, in our community, and a lot of our kids go to bed hungry, go to sleep hungry.
You're right, yeah.
So whatever we can do to move this forward and to hopefully enhance what we already have in place is, to me, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds?
Hey, I know you guys have been working closely with Polk Vision on a No Kid Hungry project as well. Is this the same grant, or they're two separate grants just for the same organization?
Two separate grants. No Kid Hungry does rigorous funding. They've funded other types of grants for us, and they had two concurrent grants running, one for school districts, one for community partners.
Okay.
So, yes, Polk Vision had submitted one for their other initiative
Okay,
as
so
well.
this is separate though
Yes,
from
ma'am.
their two different programs. Awesome, thank you.
You have your hand up, Mr. Allen?
I do, just briefly.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering when the post deadline for the position. I was reading the script, like, hey, maybe Davenport High School, you know, we've got our hospitality academy. They might be feeding a student that's going to study that and come back into our district. Was just curious in general when you plan to post it, and when we could expect to be moving forward.
I'm glad you asked. That is why we have this on your consent agenda tonight. So I know that's not always ideal. We received the grant award notification right before Christmas break. And so we want to move forward as quickly as possible. So once we have approval, they fund very quickly, which is nice. And so we can move forward with the posting quite quickly.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fields, did I see your hand again?
I was looking to see if I could answer for myself, but is this a one-year grant continuing, or what?
No Kid Hungry grants are sort of a one-time funding opportunity. They do come back to the district. Like I said, we've been a partner with them now for a few years. So this is a one-time award to fund what we asked for, which was the position. If we had future needs, I would, they would probably be willing to support us. The program will self-support itself in terms of the administrative cost and the operational cost. It's got a decent funding structure. But if we have other costs, No Kid Hungry does regularly offer opportunities to ask for those.
So this position, a one-year position, or what? If the funds go away, are we expected to incur those funds, those
So-
expenses, rather?
Right, so this will fund the first year. We would have to come back and ask for approval to keep the position based on the funding coming in from the program we operate. So we would need the position to continue the program. We should be able to show that it supports that with its reimbursement funding, but we would have to ask for approval to keep that position because it's being presented as a grant-funded position.
And by being presented as a grant position, when you all do the interviewing and the hiring, that person would know that it's a grant?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that position could possibly go away?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. We do have a question from Ms. Fortney at this time. Ms. Fortney?
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Ms. Fields covered exactly what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Very good.
Very good.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your support for this, and thank you, Ms.
Thank
Kazmarski.
you.
We appreciate your leadership and expertise.
Thank you, Mr. Huff.
All right. Item 3, 4, and 5, we have Mr. Steve Cochran coming up to review these items for us today.
If we could get just a moment here to bring our slides up. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Hunter, are we ready? Yep. Hi, good afternoon. Steve Cochran, the Senior Director for Workforce Education. With me today, I have my budget coordinator, Hunter Gambrell, just in case you want to get down in the weeds on some of these numbers with the CARES grant. First, a little information about the CARES grant, or the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Bill was passed in March of 2020. This multifaceted bill provides relief funds for individuals, businesses, and schools. who have been impacted by the ongoing pandemic. Today, we're going to give you an overview of 3 of the grants that we've received in our department that stem from the CARES bill. All right, so the first slide is the Governor's Emergency Education, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. It comes directly from the U.S. Department of Education. No application was necessary for this grant. Monies provided in this grant were designed to be split 50-50 between the technical colleges and their students. The amount received was based on 2019-2020 enrollment. Students were eligible for these funds if they were enrolled in the school. They are Pell qualified, they have a high school diploma, and they filled out an online form showing that they had need. Those were requirements of the grants for us to distribute the funds. The first funds, we took that 50% from each of those schools, and we divided it in 50% again so that we could have a distribution in the first semester and in the second semester. We thought that would benefit more students because some students complete their requirements in the first semester. Some programs only take a semester, so we thought it would be a great benefit for both programs. I think that we can go to the next slide. And this is the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund, the Rapid Credentialing Grant. We received $260,128. This was a grant that required us to put up a 25% matching funds for the grant, which we were allowed to use out of the grant we just mentioned. So we were able to fund this grant from the HEER grant. Monies spent in this grant went to, the majority of the money spent in this grant went to student scholarships. So we are actually funding students to earn industry certifications. The focus of these industry certifications were in the high-need areas of patient care technician, home health aide, and nursing assistant. Additionally, we added in welding, even though it's not necessarily needed during the pandemic. It is still a viable industry for students to go into and earn an industry certification in. Next slide. And the $349,867 we received in K-12 infrastructure, also a Governor's Emergency Education grant. Again, this was another 25% was required by the district. We paid for that 25% out of our LCI funding. The majority of money, we surveyed the schools as to what they needed, and most schools said computers. So we spent the majority of this money on computers. So far, we purchased 110 HP computers, 390 iPads, and 81 iMacs. That doesn't include iPads for teachers and the carts for charging. All right, and next slide. That concludes our presentation on our CARES Act funding. Are there any questions?
Okay, it's hard to tell which one of you are the quickest. I think, Ms. Cunningham, you edged Ms. Miller out this time.
I was going to say it was a tie, officially.
Mine's a quick question. Looking at the numbers, I noticed in all the budget periods, they're from May 2020 through September of 2022. Sounds like we've used most of the dollars so far. I mean, I know you're.
So we haven't used all of them yet.
Okay.
We started to, and
Yes.
it took a little bit of time because all this money is completely new to us. It's unprojected money. We weren't expecting it. So we had to come up with a plan and look at equipment and see where everything was. So we're just now starting to buy. All of the supply chain is very slow right now with computers and everything like that. So
Yeah.
it will take time to get those in.
Okay, so we do have, though, through the end of the period of 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
To spend all of it, so.
That's correct. And the money that we've set aside for scholarships
Yes.
for the rapid credentialing
Yes.
has not, we're probably at less than 50% of that.
Oh, wow.
But that's fine.
Sure.
Because the grant does run over 2 years.
Right.
I did want to mention that so far, we have certified 15, we have 15 individuals that have received industry certifications under the rapid credentialing, and we have 27 right now working on various industry certs. So you're exactly right. We're going to be able to extend that over 2 years and keep that money for students.
Well, thank you both for all that you do, and we know that our students truly appreciate it. So we just want to say thank you, and hopefully we can get all these funds used up to benefit our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Ms. Miller, do you still have a question?
I do, and that addressed part of it with the students. Is there a, other than marketing on the district's websites or somewhere where people can find out about this? Because I'm sure most people don't know it's available at this point. And when they talk about direct aid to students, we've never before helped fund food or housing for these kinds of schools. Who is facilitating that?
Well, we determined, as the grant came in, the grant calls for us to give 50% to the students as part of aid and relief from the pandemic. We have determined, at the direction through the grant, of what qualifies for the students to receive that money. It specifically mentions in the grant that we are supposed to give this to students to use for rent, for food, and for daycare, for whatever they need to continue their education. So how we determined it is they have to qualify for a Pell. So if they are eligible for a Pell, that shows economic need.
Right.
Additionally, in the questionnaire, we ask them, which area do you need assistance with? And so they have to indicate what area that they need to use the funds for. Now, whether they use the funds for that or not, or they use it, if they said food, but they use it for daycare, that's fine. The idea is that they show need. And we had to, and our system to show that they had need was Pell eligible, and they had to make a statement.
But your office is facilitating checks to students based on that grant. And my last question, with all of the investment in technology, which I think is appreciated by both of those schools, are these certifications or any of these options they're providing e-learning options or at home? Are you issuing these to students to leave campus? Or are they used just on campus?
Well, the rapid credentialing is a combination of both. There are things, especially in the area of the health science field, where the students do have to come in and demonstrate skills. So it's some of them are hybrid, some of them are done in the classroom. Some of them are online and some are in the classroom.
And my last question, because that was going to be my last question, but we have a hard time recovering these items from our students. Is there, I mean, do you have a system set in place to hopefully recover the items that you're checking out to these adult?
Are you referring to computers and technology?
Technology, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fields?
This is a great opportunity and a great responsibility when you're trying to keep track of the funds and making sure that the clients are eligible. So I would imagine the intake process includes someone who primarily just does this and keep track of making sure that the documentation and everything that's expected for eligibility is upfront from the parents, or from the students, rather.
And we have already done it. All of the checks, except for one, the second semester checks for Ridge? Travis, I'm sorry. For Travis have gone out. It's a combination of the process is done at the school and in our office. We make sure that the application's been filled out and that they're Pell eligible. The schools, the technical colleges themselves make sure that they have the high school diploma and the other requirements.
Well, that's important, because we got some monies through the CARES Act, and it's not easy trying to make sure that everything balances and all the documentation is there in case you have an audit that comes after the fact. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Hunter, could you share the distribution that we've given out so far?
Sure. So for Ridge Technical College in round one, we had About 215 students applied, about 119 were eligible. So they received round one checks of $1,084. For round two, 131 applied, 107 were eligible, and they received $1,147. For Travis, in round one, 114 students applied, 91 were deemed eligible. They received $1,771. And then for round two, for Travis, which is yet to go out, it should go out next week, we had 151 students apply, 120 were eligible, and they received about $1,343.
All right, thank you. Ms. Reynolds, do you have a question?
This is a great program. Do we have opportunities, or are we planning to market it through PR on Facebook and other places? Or I know it's on the website, but to make sure students are aware is my first question. And then my second question is, I know you said the money runs through next year. Are we starting to target some of our seniors in our high schools to make sure that they know that this opportunity is out there? Specifically for these, Ridge and Travis as whole, but specifically that these programs are out there?
Well, the budget period for the 50/50 grant that we've received, the distribution to the students, I believe, is over 1 year. The other ones are 2 years.
Correct, yeah, it's
Okay,
over.
so that
Yeah,
one's not
th-
included.
so
So
this
it'll be
year.
over in
Okay.
So that's already done. But the rapid credentialing scholarships are still available. And we are advertising them locally through the schools and through our normal marketing system. But I don't think that we've advertised it on Facebook, and you are probably correct, we need to do so.
Yeah, I just think through the districts, I know your Academies page, you may have it some on there, but I haven't seen it come through the district. So I think this would be a great PR piece for
I will
Polk County
get
Public
with
Schools as a whole.
Ms. Pleasant following this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Point well taken. Mr. Allen?
Hunter, Mr. Cochran, thank you guys for this. Very encouraged. I feel like we're in a very encouraging mood today. Taking care of hunger, and now we're thinking about the livelihood of individuals with a sense of success as well. I'm curious, you mentioned 15 individuals that's already gone through the rapid credentialing. What's our tracking mechanism for moving them into a position? And I would assume that these programs were strategic. Would love to hear your thoughts on why you targeted these particular programs for our community. And then do you have some type of a tracking mechanism to say, hey, 90% of these that have gone through this have landed in a position around the county?
I don't have an answer on those specific 15 students, but we are working on a report for the state. So we are looking to make sure that all those students were placed and are
Nice.
working.
That's
The majority of the first 15 were welding. They weren't all welding, but that was the majority of the first 15.
Okay.
And we do receive a lot of times when jobs, especially entry-level jobs here in the district, the hiring manager will sometimes send us the information so that we can share it with Ridge and Travis, especially when it deals with the programs that are at Ridge and Travis. So if they have any completers that they would like to recommend for jobs that are entry-level here in the district.
Okay. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay, no other questions? Gentlemen, thank you so much for your leadership. This is such a very, very important opportunity for our young adults. So thank you for your leadership in implementing and monitoring these important funds for our students.
Thank you.
Okay? And we have arrived at item 6, PM policy updates. We got our policy updates. And Ms. Wendy Dodge is coming to present those to us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This afternoon, we have an entire slate of policies recommended to you by staff for update. They are all benefits related. the actual benefits policies in each section, which would be, we have 3 sections: administrative, instructional staff, and support staff sections of policy for personnel. All 3 of those sections will be updated to reflect the changes that we are making in the vacation leave and sick leave policies. 143006 has been presented to you for update, which is vacation leave, and that is placing language into the policy that we are currently using under guidelines that had been issued by our HR department, capping the number of vacation leave days that an employee would be able to use in a row at 20 days. And then the sick leave policies in the instructional staff and support staff policies are being updated to align with the statute, what the statute says for the amount of the percentage of payout based on the number of years an employee has been with us. Rounding out at the end, after 13 years, an employee would be paid for 100% of their sick leave that they've built up. And then the administrative policy and the support staff policy impacting employees who are not member of a bargaining unit is updated with the same language, except for those employees would be capped at 50% of their salary when they leave. So they wouldn't be able to take more than that. More than that would not be able to be paid out to them before they leave. And I see questioning eyes already. So I'll leave it at that, and then please let me know if you have questions.
Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you, Ms. Dodge. Reviewing the terminal pay for sick leave essentially is where my question lies. After reading through that and trying to understand it, it would appear as though for our union employees, we're going at 100% when they leave, but for our administrative folks, we're saying we're going to leave it at the 50%. So I'm trying to understand. I've asked for some reports to be run, which I just got handed to me, so I haven't had a chance to really dissect that, but I do know that being fair and equitable across the board is really important to me. And if we are going to treat one group of employees one way, I would like to see us do the same for others. So I'm not sure where that is, but I know in the next week or so, I need more clarification to understand why there's a difference, if that makes sense. Because we have folks that, I understand, make more money because they're in an administrative position or role, but at the same time, if they've not been able to take sick time, which really is a blessing because that means they're at work, then I feel that should be somewhat parallel. If it's a financial issue, then perhaps we might want to look at capping it at a certain amount. If you were to take, let's say, the highest paid teacher in the district with the highest number of possible sick days, and let's say that number is, I don't know what it is, 75,000? I just don't know. Then would we, I know I'm asking a lot, but anyways, I know everybody's listening. So what I'm trying to say is it may not be 100% across the board, but perhaps it could be something that would be equitable rather than treating district management employees differently than union. That's really where my thought was. Don't want to take away from what we've done for our union employees. The point is, how do we make it equitable on the other side of the fence? So that's
Okay.
kind of where I'm at.
I understand your question. I did want to clarify that we are not, administrative and professional technical employees will be able to be paid out at 100% of their sick leave after 13 years of service or more, the same as instructional and support staff. So they will earn 100%, but the amount that they can receive will be capped at 50% of their current annual salary. So if you're you still would, depending on the number of days you have, you get paid 100% for those, for the number of days you have. It's the amount that you can be paid in total that will be capped at 50% of your salary. for
Are we
those.
doing that for teachers?
No,
Are we doing that for paraeducators?
no, ma'am.
Are we doing that for bus drivers?
No, ma'am.
Then why are we doing that for the other group of people? And again, it's probably not something we can answer here, but I did want to raise it publicly because I've had people reach out to me because of the specific language. And I understand after 13 years, they get 100%
Okay.
in writing, but theoretically, they're only getting 50% of the pay.
Of the pay.
I understand,
Of
I
the
understand, I understand, I understand.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a concern for me personally.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Ms. Reynolds?
I think, because you mentioned capping it at a certain amount, is that what you were saying?
Well, yeah, if you figured whatever that amount could be for someone, you know, who's the highest paid teacher and has a minimal amount or has minimal sick days that they've taken. So they're
Right.
going to be paid at the upper end of the scale. And if you said, okay, for an administrator, I don't know, pick somebody, an AP, a principal somewhere, they're making much more money. So to cap theirs at
Right.
almost 50% or less, 40% of what an outgoing teacher would make with years of service and the sick leave, I'm like, how does that work? I mean, how is that fair? I
Right.
just want to be fair. That's all I'm saying. So I'm saying if we could cap it, if the most that a teacher could go out with in paid sick days is, let's say, I don't know, $80,000, make it, okay? So what if, on the other, instead of just saying it's 50%, it would be up to $80,000, so it would be equitable across the district? That's my thought.
Okay, so I think, because I had a long conversation with Tedra about it yesterday, because I had similar concerns just in how it was fair across the board, is really the best way to put it. So I think there is a cap, but the cap is not, it's based on their current salary. So, but because, which I understand, but you figure a principal earned a lot of that sick leave likely when they were a teacher at the lower salary. So yes, it's capped at, if they're making it, so I know she printed this off, which you said you hadn't had a chance to look at, but.
Yeah, I just got it,
If,
so.
yeah, if they're capped at $50,000, that's basically the same as what most of the teachers are capped at as well.
But if you run the numbers, it's not. I'll show you that it's not. If you take
Okay,
the.
well, these are the run numbers.
They are, but they're taking an average salary. They're not looking at what the top teacher would be making.
Okay.
49,000 is not top in Polk County, not the last
Gotcha.
time I calculated. So that's why there's more to this discussion that I know we probably can't do today, but I do want to continue it and see if we can come to something that would be fair and equitable. In my opinion, 49,050 is whatever, it's not the highest paid person. So why should someone who's on a different level, and perhaps they're working at the district office and they're in a department, I just feel like it should be equitable. So if we, you know, if the highest paid teacher could leave the district with a $75,000 up to in sick leave, because that's the, looking at the salary and of course the years of the
Right.
amount of sick leave, right? The pay and that, then I feel like that should be equitable for the individuals that work in the other departments and also in our administrators out in the field. So it's just how I feel. To me, that's fair.
So the one other thing that Tedra pointed out, which if I'm misstating any of this, Tedra, please feel free to come up and correct me, but was that they also have vacation days as administrators, whereas, so they're getting paid out for that as well, whereas teachers don't have that. So they have 480 hours, or can have up to 480 hours additional to the sick leave, whereas teachers can't have additional to the sick leave. So if they're getting paid out at that 480 hours, it ends up being also another hefty chunk of change to
Sure,
add to the
sure,
sick leave.
I understand. But I mean, if
So.
you've earned that, you've earned that,
Okay.
regardless, in my opinion. I'm 1 out of 7, I get it, but I'm raising the issue because it's been brought to my attention, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
I believe that, and Ms. Tedra can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that administrators get sick and annual leave and teachers do not. And in a situation like this, in my opinion, I think that the staff need to be able to have comments on this because Ms. Wendy is not knowledgeable as knowledgeable as they are. And I don't mean any disrespect to Ms. Wendy, but I just think she's in the hot seat there. She needs to get out of it.
We appreciate Ms. Porteous coming forward.
So good afternoon, board members. Yes, Mrs. Fields, you are correct. And administrative staff does earn up to 480 annual leave in addition to sick leave. One of the reasons why we presented, and this is just an option, obviously it's first read, so if you all would like for me to prepare some other options for you, we can, just so you can see it. But to address Mrs. Cunningham's questions, it is capped, and so the cap is at 50% of their annual salary. What happens when people leave the district, specifically administrators, when we leave the district, you get something called terminal leave. That terminal leave is a combination of your annual leave and your sick leave. And in this case, Florida statute has said we can only pay out up to 480 hours of annual leave, period. What we're finding, though, is that some of our administrators are carrying over rather large leave balances and sick leave. And so when we look at it in total, it was determined by Mr. Perrone, previously here, a CFO, that maybe we should look at that and capping the amount that they would receive in a final payout or a terminal payout from the district. And so some of the numbers that I shared with you today specifically are what they would receive. I have run numbers for teachers, for paras, and for AFSCME employees as well. And just even more context for the board, one of the reasons why this came up is because in collective bargaining, when we were doing negotiating with both the unions, we thought that this would be nice because we cannot provide them with funds this year. The monies that we are provided this year specifically go to the teacher's salary increase allocation. And so they are not necessarily spread around. As a result of just trying to figure out another incentive to provide teachers and our lower paid support staff, we wanted to at least provide this to them. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. However, in changing the policy and in looking at the policy, we wanted to make sure that we didn't have people walking out with hundreds of thousands of dollars in money. And literally, that's what it would be. If we allowed our administrators to be paid out at 100% of their sick leave.
Mr. Wilson, you had a question, and then we'll have Ms. Miller.
I did. I think we did have some discussions about this, and it seems to me that the administrative pay was would create some exceptional financial issues for us because of the amounts involved. But also, isn't it true that there was some conversation about this, the 100% payout being not typical in the state of Florida? That we're kind of a trendsetter here if we did this? Did I miss?
No, so what happens, well, yes, in some ways we are. A lot of other school districts follow the statute specifically and only allow 50% across the board. There are a handful of districts that allow, after the 13th year of service, then they allow the 100% payout, but then there are caps on that as well. Miami-Dade is one of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems to me this is a way to attract and retain our teachers and our paras. It's something we can offer that other school districts can offer. And I am sympathetic to our administrators, but I think that this is an opportunity for us to offer something to our teachers and to our paras that, just to, because it seems to me, nobody is really compensated, I think, here in Polk County, because we haven't, over the years, have not received the funding. I mean, and I could go back to the millage, if we had been allowed to assess the millage rates, that without the rollbacks, even that would have been huge. So we really haven't got the funding that other school districts have. So nobody's winning here. But I think this is just an opportunity for us to just kind of reconcile some of the challenges we've had in providing pay for our teachers and our paras. So those are my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Miller?
That was my question as well. Other districts our size, if their policy is similar or if this is different. Because I know when we had our discussion, we talked about how it would be different or similar to others. And I just think that would be interest to the public
In
to what it looks
executive
like.
session, yes, we did discuss that. Well, I know that Miami-Dade does place a cap on it in terms of when you exit, how much money you can receive. They don't allow you to take a full 100% of your sick leave, particularly as an administrator.
Thank you.
All right, I believe Ms. Fortney is next, and then we'll have Ms. Fields.
Ms. Porteous, I want to thank you because I believe I met in your office when I first got elected in a thunderstorm that about drowned us both. And we talked about these options, and I appreciate you following through. The very first thing that Ms. Dodge talked about the 20 days leave in a row, can you run back over that, please, and the reasoning behind that?
Certainly. So along the same lines as having the sick leave and the vacation leave, we've run into situations operationally where we have employees at the end of their career usually take off a large amount of leave. A large amount of days because they've stocked their leave. So instead of, in this case, receiving the terminal leave payout, they may be out for 6 months because they have 6 months of leave left. What that does is really stifle the district operationally. That means that, one, I can't hire for that position because the person is in it for the next 6 months. And then two, it really does hinder the services that we can provide. I'm just going to pick on Mrs. Usher. She has a fairly large department working under her with facilities. And so if she has a facilities person that's out for 6 months at a time, then that has a twofold effect. One, again, she can't hire, but then two, and more importantly, that means that someone at the school site is not receiving the services that they so desperately need. So we thought of some sort of way that we can at least allow the employees to, one, take a large amount of leave, so the 20 days, but then two, also meet the needs of the organization operationally so that we will be able to accomplish our goals and continue moving forward as a district. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. And because I believe I've seen that happen school-based, people will leave and just take their sick leave because they only got 50% and they felt like it was better for them. So I get that. And I understand the consequences of it because I had to take care of those classrooms. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Fields?
I just think that the question that would need to be asked is what type of financial impact would it have on the school district if we did 100% for our administrators, based on what balance they might have in leave? And just hypothetically, could a person leave the school district with $250,000 based on what they have? And are we in a position that we can afford to do that? And I think we have to look at all of that. I don't think we have that kind of money, but I'm just saying.
Do you want me to respond?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Porteous, and thank you, Ms. Dodge. And so that concludes our discussion items for today. Go ahead, Mr. Wilson. Sorry.
Mr. Miller, I have a question about the informational items, the financial statements.
Okay.
I had a chance to speak with Ms. Jenkins just briefly before this meeting, and it caught my eye that our fund balance has increased considerably, and so I had some questions about why that occurred and just some general questions about the CARES money. So I was wondering if it would be okay if we invited her up just to maybe share some comments
Yes,
on that?
Sure. I was still looking in the back for you. You'd already made your way up here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you all?
Afternoon.
So, when you're looking at the November financial statements, our projected fund balance for the end of the year is at 6.53%. When our 1920 ending fund balance was 6.4%, and we had projected 5.37%. So when we set up the budget, one thing that we look at as we go through the year is our lapse in salaries. And that's not included in that initial number because we never really know what it's going to be. As of November, we're still not 100% sure where that is. One of the reasons that our fund balance climbed at the end of last year and is still climbing is due to a change in our operations because of COVID. However, we're seeing some new additions at this time. For example, we had to add $4 million for Polk Virtual because we've had to add programming in to reach all the students that have gone to our virtual school. And then we have our teacher salary increase, which is $18 million. So the last thing that could change between now and the end of the year is our CARES Act funding and how we use that funding. There have been new guidelines that have come out for the ways that we can use it, and we are looking at how to best maximize it to help not only our staff but our students. So that's the short rundown of how and why our fund balance could change.
Okay, if you want to continue, then we'll go to Ms. Miller, since you asked the first question.
So let me see if I can make sense of that from my perspective. So what I heard was that because of COVID, we saved some recurring costs, which
Yes.
means that eventually those recurring costs are going to kick in again. So that makes that savings non-recurring. Is that a
Yes.
fair statement? Okay.
You're absolutely correct.
So that means we probably would not be wise to use that for salaries, but could use it, for example, if we saw some of our funding cut by the legislature. So we could use that as a temporary bridge. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. And that's one of the things that Mr. Perone had looked at before he left is the potential cut in the FEFP, our Florida Education Finance programming funding. And we're still not sure at this point whether or not that funding will be cut. The state has not released our third calculation, which usually comes out 2 weeks prior. So it's still best for us to take a conservative approach, in my opinion.
And originally, Mr. Perone had suggested using the CARES money for that bridge that I just discussed. And now that we have this other opportunity, is it possible to free up some of the CARES money?
That is that's the opportunity that's become available. The CARES funding, it was in question whether you could use it as a bridge for salaries and other things, other costs that we incurred, and they have approved that now at this point. So we could use it for paying leave for those employees that have been out due to COVID. We can use it to cover some of those expenses, therefore allowing us to save a little bit for the future.
Well, I think that's a great opportunity for us, and I just want to voice my support for that. So thank you for coming forward and sharing those thoughts and answering those questions.
You're welcome.
Okay, I believe Ms. Miller.
Just had a couple of questions. When Mr. Perone first brought this forward, he talked about using that CARES Act money, almost predicting that the fund balance would be very low. Was there not a mechanism in place to show that wasn't going to happen? That's my first question. My second question is, in talking to delegation members, and I'd heard, from Mr. Perone and the office about the CARES Act money going, we questioned if you could put it towards that fund balance or hold it. And that was something multiple districts were doing, I think was the explanation. But now I'm being told that we were not to hold CARES Act. CARES Act should have been used as needed. Is there something that you've received since that last meeting to change that? I'm just wanting to know what the messaging was from the state on that CARES Act money, because we had some places where we could have supported more with that funding, and we chose to hold it. And now we're being told we should not have held on to it. So can you talk about what
Yes,
that
ma'am.
looked like?
It's more of it may have been the way in which it was explained. By holding it, that funding would go towards salaries, which is our largest expense. The district continued to pay employees while we were shut down during that time frame. So that's one of the things that funding can be used for. We can use it to cover salaries. the largest portion of our salaries are paid from the general fund. So when you cover those salaries, that enables you to take unrestricted funding and put it towards your fund balance to hold for the future, if that makes sense. Because
does.
we have so many different types of funding. Certain types can only be used to pay for certain things. So when Mr. Perrone spoke of holding it, it was allocating it towards a specific use and then reserving the unrestricted funding. Back when he proposed it and when the other districts proposed it, they had not decided yet if you could use that to pay for salaries. They've since sent a communication out that says that yes, that's fine, and they encourage it.
Was there a mechanism in place? Because when it was brought forward, the prediction of the fund balance was going to be very low, and now I'm surprised to see this. And so you explained how that happened, but did we not estimate, was there no way to estimate that from the beginning?
The original prediction, there was discussion about the state cutting our funding for the third calculation.
Right.
And that is what was calculated into that projection. They have not even released the third calculation, and they've changed their methodology that at this point, if they're going to reduce our funding, it will happen at the very end of the year or the beginning of next year. They're having their revenue estimating conference right now, and we don't, unfortunately, have any information. So we're kind of at a spot where we don't know what's going to happen, and rather than committing the funds that we do have, in my opinion, it's better to be a little cautious right now. And then if we end up in a great position next year, we can have several conversations about what we can do with the funds.
I appreciate that. And the last question, could we have used that CARES Act money to support? Because where we're at is, since we don't know, and I'm assuming it's because the state doesn't release that yet, we had funding available to provide more supports for our staff and our teachers and our e-learning environment. But we're not sure what's going to happen, so we hold on to it. I don't know if that's I'm going to use the spirit, because that's what, the spirit of the law, the spirit of that funding, that's my new thing from Wes. I don't know that was, when they intended the CARES Act money, it was to be used at the time of the pandemic. So to hold it until next year and anticipate that huge drop, I don't know how that's going to be read. It's going to be read that you already have dollars, so we have a reason not to fund you at that point.
We have already actually spent, don't quote me on the amount, but I think it's around $6.4 million of the CARES funding. So we've added new devices for those students that are e-learning students, or those students that are hybrid learners. And we've also we have several different options for part of that money. We don't intend to use the entire amount for salaries. So you're absolutely correct. We want to find a balance with those funds.
Was any of those dollars used for support of teachers, with support staff?
We are still in negotiations with the teachers,
Okay.
so that's not final.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions? Ms. Fields and then Mr. Wilson.
At some point in time, I think it would be very beneficial for the board members to have a general idea as to how those CARES Act monies have been expended as it relates to supporting the staff. And I guess the question that I would have is the ability to use some of the CARES Act monies to help with the offset of salaries is similar to the Paycheck Protection Program, similar to that the monies would not be utilized out of the operating budget if it can come out of the CARES Act monies to offset. I mean, the expenses are still there, but the CARES Act monies is just helping us to become stronger so that if something else comes down the road, that we're able to sustain ourselves. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wilson.
Just a quick comment. I do agree with Ms. Miller. I think that given what's happened now, where we are with the budget, that freeing up some of the CARES Act is wise, and I know you've suggested that. But you know, it's my experience, and I think you would agree with this, that when you're budgeting, you're trying to anticipate the future, and sometimes that can be incredibly difficult. And if you budget too conservatively, you have a lot of folks who are unhappy with you and even angry with you. And if you budget too aggressively, it costs people their jobs and their livelihoods. Yes. And so, you know, I agree. It's always better to err on the side of conservatism and take the heat a little bit. So I appreciate that approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Appreciate it. All right. Ms. Cunningham, that concludes our portion. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Board members, and now we come to our board agenda review. So I'll just go down as we normally do and see if there's any questions. I'm assuming, let's start with 1 through 10. Any questions on items on the board agenda for tonight, items 1 through 10? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to consent, items 11 through 16. Items 11 through 16. Okay, now are there any questions on items 17 through 31? 17 through 31 on the consent agenda. Okay, next we move to our regular agenda. We have items 32 through 35. Are there any questions?
I have a question. I'm trying to find it, Ms. Cunningham.
Okay, Ms. Fields, go ahead.
On bridge prep,
That's next. I haven't
that's
got-
next? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
okay. And so nobody from 32 to 35 on the regular? Okay, now on the public hearing, we have 2 items, 36 and 37. Go ahead, Ms. Fields.
Is there something on the contract, Mr. Bridges, that talks about bridge prep needing to have their board meetings in person or something to that effect? I'm trying to find it, but I can't.
There is, that is an item that, that has been a subject of some discussion, and I think right now the contract actually goes beyond what the statute requires, and there is an indication that they may attempt to back that off to where, to what the statute requires, which I think is, if I remember correctly, it's having a member who is local, and I think 1 meeting locally per year. But I spoke with their counsel this morning, and he indicated their desire to proceed with the contract as it is, and we can discuss that issue later.
So working through the virtual versus in-person meeting is something that you guys are going to negotiate?
Well, there's a provision in the contract right now as negotiated that requires a certain number of local meetings. What I think they're interested in is along the way getting it back to what the statute requires and not beyond. So I'm sure we'll be having that conversation, but the contract we're entering into has a provision that requires local board meetings.
And then I guess my question would be, are other charter schools required to have the same, especially with the pandemic as it is now?
I believe
no
all of our,
options?
I believe all of our charter schools, there's a statute that requires a minimal, what the minimum is for local meetings of board members. And so they're all required to do at least that. Some do a great deal more. Some of them are just purely local, and all of their meetings are held locally.
Ms. Amato, would you go ahead and?
I just didn't know if there was additional questions needed.
Sure.
So yes, as Mr. Bridges said, the current contract as presented at the last work session does state one community member and 2 board meetings held in person in Polk, well, not necessarily in person, but held in Polk County, yes.
And I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
And my thing is, I was talking to my husband last night about life in general, and what we have had as normalcy is no longer in existence with the virus. I think we all know that. And I don't think virtual meetings are going to go away anytime soon. So I think that at some point in time, not just for this situation, but in all situations, we need to be mindful that a lot of people don't feel comfortable coming to a public meeting and don't know when that's going to change. So I want to make sure that not just for bridge prep, but for anyone, that there is an option that if their members don't want to come and have a public meeting, they have an option to do a virtual meeting as well.
I think Mrs. Fields, kind of similar to how Polk County operates,
You do have a Zoom option or a YouTube option, but there is also an option to come in person. I think that's a fair account for all of our schools.
But it's not in writing, so that's
No, no,
not
this
what I
is-
see in the
no, this
contract.
is-
Okay.
That will end up being a larger conversation, a political conversation. I think you're absolutely right that virtual meetings are here to stay. The executive order that initially allowed agencies such as school boards and charter school governing boards to meet virtually has expired, which is why we're all back here in person today. But I have an idea that our legislature is going to have conversations about that, and that, of course, that is a political issue, and a lot is contingent upon how the legislature is comprised and what the executive branch will push. But I have an idea that over time, those rules are likely to change and adapt to the new virtual reality. But that'll be a state initiative.
Ms. Fields? Ms. Fields? Are you finished?
Yes, I'm
Are you
done.
done?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
and
have,
Thank you, Ms. Amato. We now have
We actually have Ms. Fortney.
Ms. Miller. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is something I talked to Ms. Amato about, and I'd like Wes to clarify a little bit. The issue with this school is that it's a corporate school. The people who opened the school do not live here. The fact that they are agreeing to have one person from Polk County on their board is very important. It is important of the citizens of Polk County who will have students in the school to see these people or have access to them. That was the request for the requirement. I know they weren't super happy about it, but that's what happens when you get to have the constituents have a role in it. But having one meeting a month, I would hope, and this is where Wes, you're talking about they can go in and renegotiate. You mean after this contract,
Yeah.
they could renegotiate?
Yeah, they can always come in with a request to make a change, just as we can. And if we reach agreement upon it, it can be brought to the school board.
I think with the governor, I think our legislators and the governor himself has taken into account this pandemic, and that's why we had that e-learning, or that Zoom and the e-learning extension. And if the school board of Polk County is meeting all together and required to do so, I would only want that for all of our students. And they've agreed to do this in the contract. It would not look well for them to come back and try to renegotiate after we vote, saying that local representation is a must. Local representation is a must. I know that's not, privy to what they've done before, but the constituents in this county want to know that they have a say about the schools that are coming in and not being ran from counties away. So as a board member, I think the board needs to know when the renegotiation comes back. If we pass this tonight and tomorrow, they come back and decide they don't want to meet in Polk County and they don't want someone from Polk County on their board. So what is the process of that? Would you come back to us to say there's been a renegotiation, or there's been an attempt to renegotiate the local aspect of this contract?
Absolutely. Through Mr. Bridges' office, we
Yeah,
would
there
go.
will be no amendment to the contract without it being brought back to the school board.
And do we have other charter schools that have the major operating outside of this county?
No.
This is the
All of
first.
all of our currently operated charter schools are kind of like a mom and pop shop. is
Right.
How I refer to them. They're local, they're homegrown. No one from the outside, so to speak, has come in to open up a charter. I know there is an existing charter with charter school, Polk Charter Academy. They have not opened at this time. So Bridge Prep, through their organization, is the first to come from an outside entity to open in Polk County. So this is new and uncharted territory for us. And I was, you all were very adamant during the presentation of the 3 things you wanted embedded into the contract. We did do those things, and here we are.
And I can tell you that I've met with another company that's coming in 2023, and they are more than willing to follow exactly the same thing with no opposition to having local people represented or having local meetings. So I'm not sure why Bridge Prep would have an issue when other company charters do not. So I appreciate you clarifying that before we vote this evening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Miller. I believe Ms. Fortney is next.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Is this an appropriate time to ask Ms. Amato about Cypress Junction Montessori?
It is on the agenda. It was earlier.
I've already passed it, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't find my copy. Can you explain, Ms. Amato, why they have a 5-year instead of a 15-year charter?
So a couple reasons. One, the team that conducted the review felt that based on their academic performance and student learning gains, that a 5-year contract was sufficient. They felt very comfortable with that decision. Also, based on state statute, they are not eligible for a 15-year contract. So the recommendation of the team was a 5-year. Send it over to the superintendent for her recommendation this evening.
Ms. Fortney, anything else?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that, Ms. Cunningham.
It's okay. It's okay. No problem, dear. Okay, Ms. Fields, you had your hand up?
Yes, I had a question. Is Bridge Prep not wanting to have representation from someone in the community serving on their board? Because I haven't heard that.
I'm sorry.
I have not heard that
No.
either. My understanding is that they were questioning how many meetings needed to be held in the county, where if the statute has a minimum number, could they be required to have a greater number? And they can agree to it contractually, but I don't think it had to do, I think they had agreed to have local representation.
Okay.
It was how many meetings they were going to have to actually hold within the physical boundaries of Polk County that was their concern.
I just had not heard
Did I
that,
get
so
that
I
right,
need
Candy?
clarity.
Yes.
Thank
Currently,
you.
the contract reads, the board shall have at least 2 public meetings per school year within the district of Polk County. A
Thank
quorum
you.
of the board must physically be present in Polk County for each of these meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify too that this is a nonprofit organization that's coming in. It's not a for-profit corporation that's proposing this. Is this correct?
I will double check that, their verbiage, but
Yeah,
I'd like
I would like
I will
clarification
get that
on
to you
that, for
shortly,
sure.
yes.
And then it seems like we're insinuating that they've disagreed for the requirement to have a board member. Is that what you're insinuating? I just want to seek
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah, I apologize, you weren't on the board at the time, but
Right.
there was a big misunderstanding that a few of the board members were anti-choice because we wanted local representation on their board. We wanted them to meet in the county twice a year, and we wanted the location to be in an area where we needed students. And that was the misunderstanding, because at the beginning, the idea was possibly South Lakeland was where they were going to go, and that was not going to be beneficial for us as a district. So there was some miscommunication on what the goals were and the vision for their placement. So I appreciate the fact that they did see the need for that area, because we are in desperate need of schools in that east area. And I appreciate the fact that they're going to set a precedent with nonprofit schools managed by a for-profit company coming in from outside will at least have a local voice. I think that's important to our constituents. That was the difference.
Okay, great. Yeah, and if we can seek clarification on that
Absolutely.
terminology, that'd be appreciative. I just did a quick search on that term that we're discussing, and this is on page 34 in the contract. The term is physically. So I'm just curious, and that word's twice noted within the contract. So the verbiage says a quorum of the board must be physically present in Polk County for each of these meetings in Polk County. So if we struck the word physically, does that change the context of that? So, the contract already says that at least 2 public meetings per school year within the district. Then they must be present. Then the last sentence in that statement says the appointed representative and charter school principal must be physically present at each meeting. So by striking that word physically, does it change the context of that paragraph?
So I think to piggyback on what Mrs. Miller just said, some of the conversation, this is an organization that has schools in multiple districts. Their home base is the Miami-Dade area. Their past practice would be they would hold their meeting, maybe let's just say in Miami-Dade, and then the actual physical school in the various counties would be open for a Zoom forum. So they were doing these Zoom virtual meetings well before the pandemic.
Yep.
At the time that this was presented, as Mrs. Miller stated, there was some concern that our local parents and the constituents in the community where the student would not have access to the board members to reach out to them, to talk to them, to see them, to express their concerns. And so that was why the word physical was actually embedded into the contract, to ensure that our students and their families had access to the board members.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Allen. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am not interested in striking that language in any way, shape, or form. I think that if we have a situation like we have with COVID and the state says it's okay to meet virtually, that's fine.
Correct.
But I have no interest in opening up to allow them to meet virtually. I think it's important that, as Ms. Miller says, that they're here and they're present in the county, and I think that's one of the things that we discussed and negotiated, right? So
Yes.
Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay. All right, so we've discussed 36, 37. Any other questions on the regular agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Bridges, we have 3 items to bring before our report tonight, correct? All right, and auditor's report, Ms. Matthews, I did not see one. We don't have one for this evening. Okay, well, that concludes our review of our agenda. Is there any other questions on any part of that agenda for tonight? Okay, we'll move forward then. Our next area is old business, our superintendent search update. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Kay for sitting in for me at the last meeting that I was unable to be at. Everything went smoothly, and I will be giving a little bit more detailed report tonight at our board meeting to save time. And then secondly, I wanted to announce that the performance reviews are currently being worked on, and we're hoping to have all that finalized within the next week to 10 days. So I appreciate your patience as we move forward with that. And that's the
Excuse
only
me.
old business and board comments. Now it's going to go around the room for everybody. You want to start, Ms. Kay?
I just had a question about the superintendent search. I was wondering, can you give us an overview of the meeting that's scheduled on Thursday? Is it a combined individual, in-person, and virtual meeting? How's that going to look?
Okay, so what's going to happen is they've been invited to an in-person meeting, which will be held here at 6 o'clock. And then this is going to be the orientation meeting for each of the search committee members. There are some who, due to personal reasons, could not be available, so they are invited to be a part of it through Zoom so that they can receive the same information. Additionally, for our live viewing audience, you can also, if you'll go on our website, Rachel's done a great job of putting that information up there. You can access it and be able to see the meeting live as it's being streamed. So that's sort of where we're at.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have any comments, Ms. Kay, that you wanted to give as we go round table now?
I have no comments.
Okay, Mr. Allen?
No comments, thank you.
Ms. Miller?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Reynolds? Mr. Wilson?
No comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, I don't either, so I think we're all set. I guess we can go ahead. Yes? Oh, Ms. Fortney, I'm sorry.
That's fine. I was wondering if Mr. Hill could provide an update on our working with the Department of Health on getting our 65 and older vaccinated.
I know that we're still working diligently with them, but I do not have any details to give you today, any specific details. I know Ms. Porteous is working closely with them in regards to that. So I know that we're definitely in contact with them and working toward that goal.
And I want to thank Ms. Porteous and you. I'm sure you were involved on getting that interest in getting the vaccine survey out. Was a great idea. Thank you.
Yes. She did a tremendous job with that.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Anyone else? Okay, just a reminder that board members, we have a grievance meeting at 3 p.m. here, And so currently then, our work session is adjourned.